Hey, my name is Logan Bennett. I'm 28 years old and I work as an HVAC technician in a small town up in northern Indiana. It's the kind of place where winters hit hard and early, and summers feel like they're trying to melt everything in sight. My house is tucked away at the end of Pineview Lane, a modest wooden cabin with peeling white paint, a front yard overgrown with dandelions, and a leaky roof that I've been meaning to fix for months. Life here has always been simple, maybe too simple. Mornings start with a quick coffee before heading to job sites to repair air conditioners or furnaces. Evenings are spent reheating pizza from the local joint, maybe cracking open an old paperback thriller if I'm not too wiped out. Weekends? I tinker around the house, patching holes or mowing the lawn. It's predictable, quiet, and honestly, a little lonely since my last girlfriend left 2 years ago. She said I lacked ambition, that I was content with too little. Maybe she was right, but I've never been one to chase big dreams. I just fix what's broken. About 3 months ago, I decided to rent out the spare room to make some extra cash. The house has 2 bedrooms, and the second one has been sitting empty, collecting dust and old boxes. I figured $500 a month could help cover the roof repairs or maybe even a new water heater. So I taped a handwritten sign to the front window. Room for rent, $500 per month, utilities included. Weeks went by with no bites. A couple of locals drove past and glanced at it, but no calls, no knocks. I started to think it was a dumb idea that no one wanted to share space with a guy like me in a rundown spot like this. Then came that night. It was mid-October, and Indiana's weather had turned nasty ahead of schedule. The wind howled through the trees outside, rattling the loose shutters, and rain hammered the tin roof like it was trying to punch through. I'd just finished up in the garage, organizing my tools after a long day fixing a busted unit at the local high school. I was wiping grease off my hands with an old rag, wearing my faded jeans and a worn-out flannel shirt, when I heard a faint voice over the storm. "Hello? Is anyone home?" I stepped out onto the covered porch, flipping on the yellow bulb that cast a dim glow into the downpour. There she was, standing at the edge of the light, drenched from head to toe. A young woman, maybe in her mid-20s, with blonde hair plastered to her face and an oversized coat that did little to shield her from the rain. She clutched a battered suitcase in one hand, her knuckles white from the grip. Her eyes, wide and a mix of defiance and desperation, locked onto mine. She looked like she'd been walking for hours, her sneakers caked in mud from the unpaved lane. I'm not begging or anything," she said, her voice trembling but steady. "I just need a place to stay for the night. I saw your sign about the room." She fumbled in her pocket and pulled out a couple of crumpled $100 bills, holding them out like proof. "I can pay up front, really. Just for tonight, and if it doesn't work, I'll be gone by morning." I hesitated. Strangers showing up in the rain wasn't common here, and I had heard stories from buddies about bad renters, people who trashed places or skipped out on bills. But there was something in her eyes that stopped me cold. It wasn't just the storm, it was like she was carrying one inside her too. The rain pounded harder, and I could see her shivering. What kind of guy would I be if I turned her away? "Come on in," I said, stepping aside and holding the door open. "Get out of that weather." She paused for a second as if weighing whether to trust me, then nodded and hurried inside, dripping water onto the worn wooden floor. I closed the door behind her, the wind slamming it shut with a thud. The house felt smaller suddenly, warmer with another presence. I grabbed a clean towel from the linen closet and handed it to her, along with a spare blanket from the couch. "Bathroom's down the hall if you want to dry off. I'll make some tea, it's hot at least." She took them gratefully, her fingers brushing mine briefly. "Thank you, really." I nodded and headed to the kitchen, filling the kettle and setting it on the stove. While it heated, I heard the bathroom door click shut, the sound of water running. When she emerged a few minutes later, her hair was toweled dry and she'd changed into something from her suitcase, a simple sweater and jeans. She looked less like a drowned rat and more like someone who'd been running from something bigger than the rain. "Name's Logan," I said, handing her a mug of steaming tea. "Claire," she replied, wrapping her hands around it for warmth. Her voice was soft, with a hint of an accent I couldn't place, maybe from somewhere out east. We didn't talk much that night. I showed her the spare room, basic, with a twin bed, a dresser, and a lamp that flickered sometimes. She thanked me again, almost whispering, and I left her to settle in. As I headed upstairs to my own room, I heard her sigh, a long, relieved exhale that echoed through the quiet house. It was the first time in years that the place didn't feel empty. Lying in bed, listening to the rain drum on the roof, I stared at the ceiling. Who was she? What had brought her here to my doorstep in the middle of a storm? I didn't know, and part of me didn't want to pry. Everyone has their reasons for showing up unannounced. But as sleep pulled me under, I couldn't shake the feeling that this stranger might just change things around here. For better or worse, the house on Pineview Lane wasn't so silent anymore. The morning after the storm broke with a pale gray light filtering through the curtains. The rain had eased to a drizzle, leaving the air crisp and heavy with the scent of wet earth. I woke earlier than usual, my body still tuned to the rhythm of workdays, and headed downstairs to brew coffee. The house felt different, less echoey maybe. I shook off the thought and focused on the routine. Grind beans, fill the pot, flip on the old radio for some background noise. As the coffee percolated, I straightened up the living room, folding the blanket I'd left on the couch and wiping down the table where puddles from last night's rain had seeped in. Footsteps padded softly behind me. I turned to see Claire emerging from the spare room, her blonde hair tied back in a neat ponytail, wearing one of my old sweaters that I'd left draped over a chair in case she needed extra layers. It hung loose on her frame, but she carried it with a quiet poise. In her arms, she held the towel and blanket from last night, both neatly folded, the towel still damp from being washed. "I washed these and hung the towel to dry," she said, her voice steady but soft, placing them carefully on the table. "I hope that's okay. I didn't want to leave a mess." I nodded, pouring a second mug of coffee. "No need to worry about that. You didn't have to, but thanks." She hesitated, her eyes flicking around the kitchen as if assessing what else she could do. I gestured to the stove. "Feel free to use the kitchen if you want. It's nothing fancy, old appliances, but they work." She gave a small nod and moved to the sink, rinsing out a couple of dishes I'd left from the night before without me asking. It was efficient, almost methodical, like she was proving she wouldn't be a burden. By the time I sat down with my coffee, she'd wiped down the counters and even straightened the mismatched mugs on the shelf. Her room, when I glanced in later that day, was spotless. Bed made with hospital corners, suitcase tucked under the frame. Not a single item out of place. Over the next few days, I started noticing things about Claire that set her apart from anyone I'd met in this town. She spoke with a refined clarity, her words chosen carefully, with an enunciation that hinted at lessons in music or dance. Smooth, controlled, like she was used to being heard. On her nightstand there was a small jar of hand cream, unlabeled but with a subtle, elegant scent of lavender and something floral. Not the cheap stuff from the drugstore. In the evenings, she'd sit in the living room with a book, usually something classic, like Jane Austen or poetry, and fold the corners of pages into tiny origami cranes, her fingers deft and precise, turning scraps of paper into delicate birds without a single crease out of line. She held herself with a natural grace, back straight, legs crossed at the ankles even when lounging on the worn couch. Sometimes she'd play soft classical music from her phone, violin concertos or piano sonatas, and adjust the cuffs of her sleeves with a habitual flick, as if straightening an invisible gown. It was subtle, but it painted a picture of someone who'd known a different life, one with polish and expectation. Claire didn't just occupy space, she contributed without fanfare. She'd prepare simple dinners, pasta with tomato sauce from canned goods or grilled cheese with a side of salad, and leave a portion covered on the stove for me if I got home late from a job. Once I found a sticky note on the fridge. "Made extra. Eat before you crash out. Thanks for the roof." Her handwriting was neat, looping cursive that looked practiced. One afternoon I came back early and heard laughter from the front yard. Peeking out, I saw her sitting on the porch steps with the neighbor's kid, a scrappy 8-year-old girl named Lily who often wandered over. Claire was showing her how to fold a crane, her voice gentle and encouraging. "See? Pinch here, and it flies." Lily beamed, clutching her lopsided bird, and Claire's smile was genuine, lighting up her face in a way that made the yard seem brighter. I didn't pry into her past. Everyone carries scars they don't want poked at, and I figured she'd share if she wanted. For now, her presence was enough to shift the house's rhythm. The kitchen light stayed on longer in the evenings. The air carried faint traces of tea she'd brew, chamomile mostly, and occasionally I'd catch snippets of her humming along to the music. It wasn't intrusive, it was comforting, like the house was breathing again after being held too still for too long. As the days blurred into a week, then two, I found myself looking forward to those small moments. Sharing coffee in the morning, exchanging a few words about the weather, or a book she'd read. Claire remained guarded, her smiles quick but not deep, as if she was afraid to settle in too much. But bit by bit, the tension in her shoulders eased. One night, after a particularly grueling job where I'd spent hours in a crawl space fixing a duct, I came home to find the table set with a simple stew she'd simmered. We ate in companionable silence, the radio playing softly in the background. Watching her across the table, folding a napkin into yet another crane, I wondered what she was running from. But here, in this old house, she seemed safe, at least for now. One Tuesday evening, a couple of weeks after Claire had settled in, the air in the house carried the faint scent of garlic and herbs from the stew we'd shared. We'd fallen into a quiet routine by then, me handling the heavy lifting around the place, her taking care of the small touches that made it feel lived in. That night, we were cleaning up the kitchen together, me scrubbing the pot while she wiped down the counters. The radio hummed low in the background, playing some old country tune about lost highways. It was peaceful, almost domestic, until something small changed everything. As Claire reached for a dish towel, a silver locket slipped from the pocket of her sweater and clattered onto the linoleum floor. I bent down to pick it up before she could, my fingers brushing the cool metal. It was a simple piece, oval-shaped with a delicate chain, but when I flipped it open out of curiosity, my breath caught. Inside was a faded photo of an elegant couple dressed in formal attire, smiling at some event. On the back, engraved in fine script, "To Claire, with love, Dad." And below that, the name William Montgomery. I froze. William Montgomery, the real estate tycoon whose face had been plastered on billboards across Indiana for years. The man who'd bulldozed entire neighborhoods in towns like mine to build luxury developments, pricing out families who'd lived there for generations. His company, Montgomery Properties, had turned our local mill district into high-end condos a few years back, displacing folks I knew from the shop. I'd never met him, but his name carried weight, and not the good kind. I looked up at Claire, the locket still in my palm. Her face had gone pale, eyes wide with a mix of fear and resignation. "Please," she whispered, her hand trembling as she reached for it. "Don't tell anyone. I just want to live without being judged by that name." I handed it back slowly, watching as she clutched it like a lifeline. The kitchen felt smaller, the radio's twang suddenly intrusive. "Montgomery," I said quietly, piecing it together. "As in—" She nodded, sinking into one of the chairs at the table. Her shoulders slumped, and for the first time since she'd arrived, she looked truly vulnerable. Not just tired from the road, but worn down by something deeper. "He's my father," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I left because I couldn't stand it anymore. The expectations, the spotlight, the way everyone saw me as the Montgomery girl instead of just me." I pulled out the chair across from her and sat, giving her space. "You don't have to explain if you don't want to." But she did, in fragments, like she was testing the words. She told me about growing up in luxury, mansions, private schools, vacations in Europe, but how it all felt hollow after her mother died when she was a teenager. Cancer, quick and cruel. Her father had remarried soon after to a woman half his age and started dismantling pieces of their old life, including the family home where Claire had grown up with her mom. He'd torn it down to build one of his developments, erasing the memories like they were just blueprints. "That house was all I had left of her," she said, her eyes glistening, "and he replaced it with condos for strangers. I lost faith in him after that, in everything." I listened without interrupting, the stew pot forgotten in the sink. It explained so much, the refined way she spoke, the graceful habits, the unlabeled cream that screamed high-end. She'd walked away from it all, hitchhiking and scraping by, determined to build a life on her own terms. "I didn't take a dime from him," she added. "I just needed to be invisible for a while." That night, after she retreated to her room, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my laptop in the dim light of my bedroom, the rain starting up again outside. A quick search pulled up article after article, photos of Claire at galas, arm in arm with her father at ribbon cuttings, headlines about Montgomery's empire expanding. Then, abruptly, she vanished from the public eye about a year ago. No mentions, no scandals, just gone. There were whispers in forums about a family rift, but nothing concrete. I closed the browser, staring at the screen. She wasn't just running from nothing. She was escaping a cage gilded with gold. A few days passed in uneasy normalcy. Claire threw herself into chores, as if proving her worth, but I caught her glancing at the windows more often, like she expected someone to show up. I didn't press. Instead, I made sure she knew she was welcome. "Stay as long as you need," I told her one morning over coffee. She smiled faintly, but her eyes held shadows. Then it happened. I was in the garage tinkering with a faulty compressor from work when I heard tires crunching on the gravel driveway. Peeking out, I saw a sleek black SUV pulling up, shiny, out of place in our modest neighborhood. A man in a crisp suit stepped out, umbrella in hand against the light drizzle, and knocked on the front door. By the time I wiped my hands and hurried inside, Claire was already at the threshold, her face ashen. "Miss Montgomery," the man said smoothly, his voice polished like his shoes. "Your father sent me. He's been worried sick. It's time to come home." I stepped up behind her, placing a hand on the doorframe. "She's not going anywhere she doesn't want to." The man glanced at me, sizing me up, grease-streaked shirt, work boots, and dismissed me with a curt nod. "This is family business. Mr. Montgomery just wants to ensure her safety." Claire straightened, her voice firmer than I'd ever heard. "Tell him I'm safe, and I'm not coming back. Not to that life." He lingered for a moment, pulling out a business card. "If you change your mind." But she didn't take it. He left, the SUV backing out smoothly, leaving tire tracks in the mud. We stood there in the doorway, the drizzle misting our faces. Claire turned to me, her eyes searching mine. "You didn't have to do that." "Yeah, I did," I said. "Here, you're Claire, not a Montgomery. And if that's what you want, I'll stand by it." For the first time, she reached out and squeezed my arm. A brief touch, but it lingered. The storm from her past had arrived, but in that moment we faced it together. The whispers started small, like ripples in a pond after a stone's been skipped. A day or two after the assistant's visit, I noticed the stares at the hardware store. Old Mr. Harlan from down the road glancing my way while buying nails, his wife murmuring something behind her hand. By the end of the week, the local diner was buzzing with it. "Did you hear? That Montgomery girl, the tycoon's daughter, is shacking up with the HVAC guy on Pineview." The papers picked it up too, a small-town rag running a story about heiress hiding in plain sight, complete with a grainy photo of our house snapped from the street. Reporters called once, leaving a voicemail I deleted without listening. Neighbors drove by slower, peering through car windows, and even at work my boss pulled me aside with a raised eyebrow. "You sure you know what you're getting into, Logan?" Claire bore the brunt of it. She'd go out for groceries and come back with her head down, avoiding my eyes. One evening, I found her sitting on the front porch steps, wrapped in that old blanket, staring at the darkening sky. Her knees were pulled up to her chest, and even in the dim light, I could see the tracks of tears on her cheeks. The air was biting, the first real chill of winter settling in, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and distant wood smoke. I sat down beside her close enough to offer warmth but not crowd her. The porch creaked under my weight, and for a long moment, we just listened to the wind rustling the trees. "It's getting bad," she said finally, her voice barely audible. "The stares, the questions. I didn't want to drag you into this." "You're not dragging me," I replied, keeping my tone even. "This is my house, too. And you're welcome in it." She turned to me, her blue eyes searching mine, red-rimmed and weary. "But why? You barely know me. This could ruin things for you, your job, your life here." I thought about it, about the simplicity I'd clung to for so long, the quiet that had felt safe after my ex left. But with Claire, that quiet had turned into something fuller, something alive. "Maybe I like having you around," I said. "And if today you decide to go, I won't stop you. But if my bed still has an empty spot, will you stay with me?" The words hung there, raw and unexpected, even to me. Her breath caught and fresh tears welled up. She wiped them away with the back of her hand, a small, broken laugh escaping. I've never felt like any place was home. Until now. Are you sure you want someone like me staying? I reached over, my hand finding hers, cold fingers intertwining with mine. This house doesn't need money or status. It needs someone who wants to belong to it. And if that's you, then yeah, I'm sure. She squeezed my hand, holding on like it was an anchor. We sat there as the stars began to prick the sky, the chill seeping through our clothes, but neither of us moved. For the first time, the silence between us felt like a promise rather than a barrier. The next evening, the storm hit full force, not from the weather, but from her past. I was in the kitchen chopping onions for a simple chili when headlights swept across the windows. Peering out, I saw a luxury sedan pull up, a gleaming black Mercedes that screamed, money. The door opened, and out stepped William Montgomery himself. I'd seen his face in those articles, sharp features, silver hair, a tailored coat that probably cost more than my truck. He strode up the path with purpose, his shoes crunching on the gravel, ignoring the light rain that had started again. Claire was in the living room, folding laundry, when the knock came, firm, insistent. She froze, her face draining of color. I wiped my hands on a towel and went to the door, opening it just enough to block the view inside. Can I help you? Montgomery's eyes flicked over me, appraising and dismissive. I'm here for my daughter, Claire. She's not going anywhere she doesn't choose to, I said, my voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. He stepped closer, pulling an envelope from his coat pocket. Thick, sealed, the kind that held checks or contracts. Son, you don't know what you're dealing with. This is for your trouble. Take it and let her come home where she belongs. I took the envelope, feeling its weight, but didn't open it. Instead, I handed it right back. There's some things money can't buy. Claire doesn't need a palace. She needs a family. And I need someone brave enough to stay, to live real. His jaw tightened, a flash of anger in his eyes. You think you can give her that? In this shack? Before I could respond, Claire appeared behind me, her hand on my shoulder. Dad, she said, her voice calm but edged with steel. He's right. I'm not a piece of property to fetch back. Montgomery's gaze softened slightly, but only for a moment. Claire, this is ridiculous. Come home. We can fix this. She shook her head, stepping forward. Tears streamed down her face now, but she didn't look away. Fix what? You fixed everything after Mom died. Married that woman, tore down our house, the one place I had left of her. You turned it into condos, like her memory was just real estate. I lost faith in you then. I needed to find my own way. The words hung heavy, the rain pattering on the porch roof like applause. Montgomery stood there, envelope still in hand, his face a mask cracking at the edges. For the first time, he looked old, vulnerable. I did it for us, he muttered. For the future. Your future, she replied. Not mine. He lingered, rain dripping from his coat, then turned without another word, getting back into the car. The engine roared to life and he drove off, tail lights fading into the night. Claire collapsed against me then, her arms wrapping around my waist in a fierce hug, sobs shaking her body. I held her there in the doorway, the chill wind whipping around us, but in that moment the house felt unbreakable. She'd chosen to stay, not out of fear, but out of something real growing between us. As her tears soaked my shirt, I whispered, "You're home now." And for the first time, I believed it too. The news broke like a slow wave across the town, rippling out from our little house on Pineview Lane and crashing into the headlines. Claire's decision to speak out about Montgomery Properties' ruthless developments, displacing families, cutting corners on safety, all for profit, sparked an uproar that echoed through Indiana. Articles detailed how her father's empire had steamrolled communities like ours, and Claire's voice, once hidden, became the catalyst. Anonymous tips flooded in from former employees, photos of unsafe sites leaked, and soon enough, investigations followed. William Montgomery stepped down quietly, his board citing personal reasons, but everyone knew the truth. The luxury projects halted mid-construction and funds were redirected. some to reparations for those who'd lost homes, others to community programs. Our neighborhood, once eyed for redevelopment, was spared. People who'd glared at us started nodding in respect when Claire walked by. She didn't go back to that world. Instead, she carved out something new right here. Claire took a job at the local community arts center, a modest building downtown with paint-splattered walls and classes for kids from all walks. She taught drawing and sculpture, guiding little hands through charcoal sketches or clay figures. I'd drop by sometimes after work, watching her lean over a table, encouraging a shy boy to add color to his landscape. "It's not about perfect," she'd say. "It's about what you feel." The kids adored her patience, her stories of turning scraps into art. She volunteered too, helping folks down on their luck rebuild resumes or find resources, drawing from her own escape. "I know what it's like to start over," she'd tell them. It wasn't glamorous, but it lit her up, gave her purpose beyond the shadows of her last name. As for our house, it transformed without fanfare. I took down the room for rent sign one crisp afternoon, nailing it into the garage wall as a reminder of how it all started. Claire's room became truly hers, a soft lamp casting golden light in the evenings, shelves lined with books she'd collected from thrift stores, and windowsills dotted with small cacti she'd planted in mismatched pots. She tended them like treasures, watering them carefully and turning them toward the sun. The house filled with new sounds, her laughter echoing from the kitchen as she experimented with recipes, classical music drifting from her phone on lazy Sundays, the sizzle of pancakes on weekend mornings. Mornings we'd share coffee on the porch, bundled in blankets against the chill, talking about nothing and everything. A dream she'd had, a job I'd wrapped up, plans for painting the exterior come spring. The stares faded over time. Neighbors who'd gossiped now waved hello, some even stopping by with casseroles or invitations to barbecues. Claire handled it with grace, never bitter, always forward-looking. We'd take walks down the lane at dusk, her hand slipping into mine naturally now, the weight of her past lifting with each step. One evening, as we sat by the fireplace I'd finally fixed, crackling logs warming the room, she opened up more about her mother. The woman who'd taught her to fold those cranes, who'd whispered stories of independence before the cancer took her. "She'd like you," Claire said, her head on my shoulder. "You remind me of her. Quiet strength." A year passed in that gentle rhythm, seasons cycling through like pages in a book. Winter's snow blanketed the yard. Spring brought blooms to the dandelions we'd let grow wild. One morning in April, with sunlight streaming through the kitchen window and birds chirping outside, I woke to the soft sound of singing. I padded downstairs in my socks, the wooden steps creaking familiarly. There was Claire in one of my oversized shirts that hung to her thighs, her hair tousled from sleep. She stood at the stove, humming a melody I didn't recognize, flipping eggs in a skillet. The air smelled of fresh coffee and toast, steam rising from the mugs she'd set out. She turned when she heard me, a smile breaking across her face, radiant, unshadowed. "Morning," she said, plating the food. We ate at the table, sunlight warming our backs, talking about the day ahead. Me with a furnace install across town, her with a class on watercolor techniques. As we cleared the dishes, she paused, leaning against the counter, her eyes meeting mine with that same depth I'd seen on the porch that stormy night. "Your bed, does it still have an empty spot?" I set down the plate, stepping closer, my hands finding her waist. The question carried echoes of that pivotal moment, but now it felt lighter, laced with certainty. I pulled her gently into my arms, feeling her warmth against me, her heartbeat steady. "As long as you want to stay," I whispered. "That bed, this house, and my heart will always have room for you." She looked up, tears glistening but joyful this time, and kissed me softly. We didn't need a grand wedding, no diamond rings or vows in a church. Our commitment was quieter, woven into the fabric of daily life. Shared meals, late-night talks, hands held through uncertainties. We'd built something real from the ruins. Two people who'd once wandered alone, now choosing to stay, to heal, to grow together. In the end, it wasn't about erasing the past or claiming some fairy tale ending. It was about a small house at the end of a lane, no longer silent, filled with light and life. Claire had found her freedom, I'd found my purpose, and together, we'd turned a shelter into a home. Hey,